What do you think adds the super in a super app?
It can be any app that has multiple services that are not directly connected to each other. So like, let's say if it's a social media app and they have social features, we wouldn't really call it super app, but as soon as they slap in like hotel booking, we would call it a super app because now they have like these adjacent services in there. So we have eSIM, hotel booking, airport lounges, remittances coming up. We just announced with Neom a partnership where the players are global, so we can offer it in anywhere in the world pretty much. So this way, we don't need to go into localizing the service provider. However, for e-commerce, for example, when we partner with certain company, we come into the market and we try to knock on the doors of local e-commerce merchants or retailers who can be on the back end providing us the inventory for those products.
Joining me on the couch is Kaniyet Rayev, who is the CEO of Boxo. What do the traditional banks need to do differently to be able to attract customers to transact with them? And I use the word transact in a holistic sense, right? More on the beyond banking services.
The reason they exist is because traditional banks just didn't innovate. And I used to live in UK. I had free bank accounts, like all the big names, and the apps were just bad. You were just not enjoying opening it.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode of Couchonomics with Arjun. Joining me on the couch, all the way either from Kazakhstan or Singapore, I'll let him introduce himself, is Kaniyet Rayev, who is the CEO of Boxo. I'm going to let him explain what Boxo does, but it is from the world of super apps, which usually makes for an interesting conversation. But with that, let me welcome Kani, if I might call you that.
Yeah, please.
Kani, welcome to the couch.
Thank you so much, Arjun. Excited to be here.
I'm not quite sure it'll be exciting, but I'm sure it'll be informative. Kani, let's start with a very simple question, twofold. What is Boxo and where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So Boxo, first of all, we are a Singapore-based company. We operate in the field of super apps. In essence, what we do is we help any app to become a super app. So we'll go into technicalities of what exactly it means, but in essence, we help any app to launch multiple new verticals and new services without building all of these features in-house. So the idea for this company and the technology came from, first of all, the trip to China back in 2018, when I first encountered WeChat and Alipay. And being kind of techie myself, it was very interesting to see that completely different paradigm in terms of the consumer behavior, where you would, instead of opening multiple apps, you would just like order food or taxi inside of WeChat and Alipay. And I couldn't understand why this is not happening in the rest of the world. And the only argument I found was that it will come to the rest of the world at some point, and I want to be part of that journey because I feel like it's an awesome technology. So,
okay, but let me then put I guess the $1 billion question out there. Super apps have been talked about for over a decade. Everybody mentions WeChat as sort of the poster child. The truth of the matter is that there are lots of things which are very unique and different about China. Scale, their adoption of digital technology, the fact that a number of these services were always available to be onboarded, and also this whole concept of the app within an app or a mini app within an app, right? A number of other so-called super apps that have come up globally have not been entirely the same. A number of them have actually struggled, to be honest with you, because they're not able to either build necessary engagement or be able to give, I guess, the advantages that the consumers look at. If I just ask you a question on super apps, right? Why do you believe that super apps will become a global phenomenon? Right? And secondly, for any economy, even for someone as big as China, where there's only a handful of super apps, is there a market which is big enough for having that many super apps?
So to answer the first question, we see two dynamics. First of all, it's just a simple, like, why super apps are good. It's just simple user experience because when you I was in China this April. It was first trip since COVID. And the only app I used for all my daily interactions was WeChat and Alipay. So I was ordering taxi, ordering food, booking railway tickets, checking the airport timetables, everything inside one app. And we just see that just by observation and asking people who live in China or used to live in China, it's an amazing user experience that you miss when you go out. So on the contrary, when I'm in Dubai, for example, I have to download Dubai Airport app. I have to download Kareem, which I only use here. I have to download Talabat or one of those food delivery apps. And the Dubai Mall has an app. Mall of the Emirates has an app. Dubai Hills Mall has an app. And then there are a bunch of these loyalty apps as well that it's already accounting 10, 15. Even Louvre in Abu Dhabi has a separate app, even though I just want to check the map, Mm-hmm. And this is first dynamic where we see that they're aggregating the user experience for infrequent use cases into one single interface that is already inside of your phone, makes it slightly more convenient for end customers. On the other side, what we see is the existing applications are now graduating from their core use case. So for example, digital banks, there are X number of services you can build in finance, right? Loans, deposits, insurance, maybe that's it. What do you do after that? And that's where we see the most advanced digital banks growing in that space. So Revolut and Nubank, they actively go into lifestyle, right? Nubank launched telecom recently. Revolut has shopping, hotels, eSIMs, and a bunch of other features. And that's where essentially we see the convergence where from user experience point of view, it looks nice and it's very, very useful. And then businesses graduate into that. And to answer the question in terms of the scale in China and if more super apps can emerge in other countries, first of all, good example of a super app in a small country is actually in Kazakhstan. You had a chat with Mikhail, exactly. And when we started in 2019, I wouldn't expect Kazakhstan to be the country where the super app will emerge fastest outside of China. And this is a good example where a bank which was tier 2, tier 3 bank, not very well known, just emerged as the digital platform for all daily necessities. And so super apps can work in big scale like China, and also in small countries like Kazakhstan, if done well. And even in China, there are interesting super apps emerging, such as banks they don't look like banks in the rest of the world. You can buy a car, for example, directly inside of the bank app in China. There are food delivery kind of super apps, travel super apps. So we see that there are a lot of different potential paths that super apps can take in different parts of the world.
So let me ask a question, right? And again, I don't expect you to answer this question because at the end of the day, you're a service provider into super apps, not building one yourself, right? Unless that is the plan down the stream. But let's not. We'll explore that question later. So for super apps to work, as you said very correctly, there needs to be something super about them, and we'll come to that because that is a question by itself. But let's assume they've got to have a set of services that are relevant to me as an individual, and sometimes they need to be different because what might be relevant to you might not be relevant to me, right? Secondly, the role of the orchestrator, right, who is the provider of the super app, has to be one of an honest broker. Because in a lot of ways, what you're going to do is sometimes not offer as much choice, which is kind of something the way we have grown up in the Western world, which is choice has been king, right? Which wasn't the case in China when I guess WeChat and so on and so forth came up, because it was all about convenience. So, you give a trade-off and again, is the world shifting towards convenience so rapidly that we're willing to give choice, right? And thirdly, are we willing to give choice at cost? At price, for example, right? The third element here is being able to build these UI UXs, which are incredibly intuitive.
Complex.
But they're complex, but they have to be intuitive and designed to you and me, because let's be honest, right? We have people who are a certain age group, which are not digitally native, who will want to use super apps, and then there are youngsters who know no different, right?
Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of, if I may say, challenge, right? It's not as easy. And then finally, there's this constant work that is required in the back end in terms of aggregating new services, so on and so forth. Let's put the last thing aside because that's what you're focusing on, and you're basically taking the headache away.
Yeah.
What do you think adds the super in a super app, right? And what are the ingredients of success based on, let's put WeChat aside, some of the others that you've seen, whether it's Kaspi or I don't know if you want to call Revolut super app now. What's the recipe of success?
Yeah. So, first of all, what we in our kind of, this is like, there's no kind of Oxford Dictionary terminology for super app, right? So the way we describe it is it can be any app that has multiple services that are not directly connected to each other. So like, let's say if it's a social media app and they have social features, we wouldn't really call it super app, but as soon as they slap in like hotel booking, we would call it a super app because now they have like these adjacent services in there. And the way we think is there can be apps that have 100,000 users and they can be a super app, and then there can be apps that can be millions of users. But the one thing that is definitely what we think is important is consumer engagement inside of this app needs to be very high. And we see it already where we can have an app which is used once a month by, let's say, 10 million users, and we launch a service in there and it doesn't work as fast as we want just because people are not used to it. And on the contrary, we'll have an app with like 200,000 monthly active users, but it's very sticky. Let's say they enter the app every week. And then we launch a mini app, for example, in there, or new service, and suddenly 10-20% of the customer base is using that and transacting. So for us, what's important is the engagement of the app, which is, I guess, a product of the love towards this brand. So for example, like I personally really like Trip.com, and this is a travel super app. I was pretty loyal customer of Booking.com before, but now I primarily use Trip.com because I really appreciate they can do everything travel related inside of Trip.com. Likewise, like I would really like, unfortunately I don't have Revolut in Singapore because it's very limited, but I really appreciated Revolut when I used to live in UK because I could do not only just banking service, but also I could trade in there, I could buy crypto, I could buy insurance, a lot of things, like even donate money. And now in Singapore, it's a bit of a challenge. So yeah, I feel like the customer love towards the brand and the usage of different services inside of one app, this is the kind of core of becoming a successful super app. And it doesn't need to be like millions of users, it can be pretty small as well.
So that's very interesting. I'm going to park a question because I do want to ask you that later, but let me circle back. So launching in Singapore makes sense. Asia Pacific is a more mature market in terms of the understanding of the super app courtesy, as you said, you know, Alipay and WeChat. We obviously have Grab, we have Gojek, so on and so forth. Why are you in the Middle East?
Yeah. So it's interesting because we see super app trend emerging not only in Asia. We started in Asia because we thought, as you said, due to proximity to China, it will be faster to adopt, and which happened in 2020. We already started getting our first clients there. But in Middle East right now, what we see is that what happened in Asia, for example, 5, 6, 7 years ago, which are mobile wallets, digital banks, any kind of app that was serving certain niche, now they are moving into new verticals. And I guess, again, it's a matter of innovation because you cannot innovate in, let's say, payments a lot, you know. At some point, you're like done, right? And that's where I guess the interest comes in, where the apps start to think, what else can they do? And in Middle East right now, the time is where digital banks are starting to emerge into other verticals. There are a bunch of digital wallets like, STC Pay now is STC Bank. And here as well, there's EN Money, which is like starting to work on their acquisition. And they are now thinking about what else can they do outside of payments. And and we are following the trend and the market need. Like in Middle East right now, we see that. But at the same time, we're just launching Canada, which is our first Western market. Interestingly, it's a digital bank partner, and we see the emergence of super apps not only in Asia now, but also in Western markets, which is very, very interesting for us.
Very interesting. So let's take the Middle East, for example, right? And I guess this question is eligible everywhere. The way I see it is you have digital banks or banks with digital front ends, right? Because why should we only talk about digital banks? Because a lot of traditional banks actually are building very good front end engagement tools, right? So they want to get into what we call beyond banking services because they want to reduce the cost of customer acquisition, have people utilize their products from an embedded perspective, because that is a macro trend which actually helps the super app journey, which is around embedding financial services into non-financial activities. So that's one end. They're moving towards, call it these multifunctional super apps.
Yeah.
Then you have digital wallets, and I personally think I agree with you. Payments are getting highly commoditized in terms of the margins that you can make. They need to think about other things that they can offer, right, which attracts that customer back onto the digital wallets. Having payments is a great thing because I think it's arguably the stickiest product that you might have. So they are actually becoming super appish too by offering more. Then you actually have, I guess, generation 1, generation 2 fintechs. I use BNPL as an example, who are realizing that they need to go beyond BNPL, right? Some are extending into marketplaces. Klarna is a great example. Others want to start offering other financial services products who are also wanting to becoming sort of super apps, right? So now we start creating this incredibly crowded space in the middle where there is a bunch of people who will be offering services which each other offer, all under this umbrella term in terms of super apps. Right, simple question for you. Who will succeed? Because you cannot have 50 super apps in a market.
Agreed.
Let's just take the UAE, which has, I don't know, a addressable market of less than 5 to 6 million people, right? Who will succeed?
Yeah. So I think the most, as mentioned, the most important thing is the customer love towards the first product that the app launched. So for example, if let's say, if you take like traditional banks as an example, despite how many services and how good the services we can launch in there, if the core app is laggy, slow, people don't like it, you can like launch 100 services and it's not going to work. And vice versa, if the app has small user base but people love it and it's growing, for them to expand it to new verticals is probably going to be easier. And I guess in each country these companies are different because let's say in Kazakhstan, Kaspi was like traditional bank which suddenly ended up being big, right? In China, it was Alipay, which is mobile wallet, and WeChat, which was a social media app. In UAE, I don't know, honestly, because I don't know what people think, what people really love here. And not like use, but actually like love, so that when they launch something new, they'll just adopt it straight away. I guess that will be the super app which will emerge as a winner. And the rest of the world is the same. Like Klarna is like a household name in Sweden, but it's basically like BNPL turned themselves into bank, turned themselves now with like full-on strategy of becoming a super app. New bank in Brazil, universally loved product. Now they're launching telco, probably going to grow fast. And then they launch marketplace, as far as I know, also doing quite well. So in different countries there are going to be like local fintechs, local companies, maybe from industries we haven't even thought about that people just love, and this will become like a super app in there.
So before I get into deep in terms of what do you offer and get a little bit into technicals, why aren't we actually seeing some successful super apps which are targeting micro and small businesses?
Yeah. So in general, being business like small and medium business ourselves, again, I just feel like the current digital platforms are not sufficient yet. Again, like I use some of these digital kind of SME banking softwares in Singapore, and even though they're useful, but they are not like, my feelings towards it are not as good as my peers in US who love Ramp and Brex. And now Brex, for example, launched travel. They have hotel embedded and flight embedded inside of Brex, and people are, I guess, using it because the love towards the product is so good. Here in Middle East, there are, as far as I know, a bunch of these SME kind of banking platforms. I guess they need to first like get to a point that they are doing really amazing job where people love it, like SMEs love it and use it on daily basis as the means of their daily finance interactions, where they're going to start launching something new and they'll adopt it straight away. So I guess this paths again, like Kaspi took, they had like this SME, they have a consumer app, but not a lot of people actually talk about their SME super app. And this SME super app started as just payment acceptance, but now they don't have multiple apps. They have one SME app, which has POS, QR payment, just normal payment, e-commerce, and a bunch of other features, accounting, submitting accounting, like everything inside of one app, and it's not desktop, it's like a mobile app. Yeah, and again, like people just love it.
And I think my working hypothesis over the last 5 years is that I think there is a clear area there for someone to actually get in, have a core offering which is differentiated, build that. Because at the end of the day, right, if you look at a micro and small business, the greatest, I guess, or the scarcest resource that you guys have is time.
Exactly.
Right? And if someone can actually solve that problem for you getting what you want in the quickest way, I think you guys will give a bit of premium away. Because 100%. To be honest with you, your time has far greater value than selecting, I don't know which cleaning service you want for your offices, right? People will actually take those services and so on and so forth. Because I am hoping that things will move. Let's go a little bit into what is it that Boxo does. So unbox Boxo for me, please.
Awesome. This is actually nice. We'll probably steal that.
More than welcome to.
Essentially what we do is, again, from business point of view, to make it very simple to understand, is you have an app, you want to launch a new vertical. It can be e-commerce, travel, financial services, or anything else. We can help you launch those services without you building it. From technical point of view, in essence, what we've built is what we call a mini app platform, which enables us, it's a set of developer tools, software development kit, bunch of APIs, the platform, which enables any native app to launch multiple, what we call mini apps, without significant development effort for each mini app. So it's one-time integration. You can pick and choose what to launch, and then you can launch all of these services in there. Our typical use cases are bank app launch e-commerce, or launch eSIM or games, crypto app launches games. We have real estate partner in Saudi Arabia, which launched marketplace inside of their app, and home services, for example. And our job is just to come to a partner, see what their needs are, like their current product roadmap, and see what we can help them build or launch like in 2 weeks instead of them taking 6 months and the whole squad to launch, basically.
Kaniyet, you're oversimplifying this, right? Yeah. Let me ask you, there are 3 or 4 questions which stem right to me. So yes, you've aggregated all these key services, but in no particular order, and you can choose to answer them. Firstly, how do you go about localizing and customizing those services that are relevant to a local jurisdiction? Yep. Okay, so that's one. Because there's a number of angles, i.e., A, they can provide that service, B, is their data resident in the right place, et cetera, right? Second part of that equation is the whole commercials, right? You'll be talking to some of the big names on the front end, right? Some of your providers might be equally large organizations on the back end, and some of them might be global players, right? So how do you actually achieve the commercial efficiency by being in the middle of that relationship? Because you could argue that the two people can dance together, right? I'm not even going to get into the technical side, but there is a third element, which is, and you mentioned it, right? For you to love an app, there are a number of components to it. Trust is one of them, but UI, UX, or user experience is definitely an important element to it. Yeah. And user experiences vary, right? At the end of the day, you want that sort of seamless migration from a front end. You don't want to constantly be being redirected because it's clunkier. It doesn't integrate with other things. You have a payments capability in the app. You integrate something which is travel. You want to be able to integrate payment into travel. So how do you solve for these 3? And I got 10 other questions to ask, which I won't. But let's go through these 3. 1, how do you localize it? B, how do you actually achieve commercial excellence or commercial differentiation? And thirdly, how do you achieve user experience?
Yeah. So in terms of localization, you're totally right. So in terms of our feature set, as mentioned, we have e-commerce, travel, financial services, gaming. These are like, and lifestyle. These are like kind of 4 or 5 pillars. So typically we try to start with something that's global. For example, travel. So we have eSIM, hotel booking, airport lounges, remittances coming up. Well, we just announced with Neom a partnership where the players are global, so we can offer it in anywhere in the world pretty much. So this way we don't need to go into localizing the service provider. However, for e-commerce, for example, when we partner with certain company, we come into the market and we try to knock on the doors of local e-commerce merchants or retailers who can be on the back end providing us the inventory for that specific products, for those products. So this is on the kind of services side. That's how we localize.
One question on that.
Yeah.
A lot of your customers are not going to be new to that.
Yeah.
Right. Let's assume I already have a relationship with a remittance player.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to use the partner you have signed.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
We'll just reconnect the front end that we've built, the mini app that we have, to a new API provider. And pretty much for all verticals we have, we, like, again, a bit technical, but we usually build this bridge which enables us to reconnect to different API providers without redeveloping the front end. So this way, this is actually a good example. If, let's say, we have an example where like a partner is asking for hotel booking, but not like one of those global players that we work with, but with local kind of provider because they have like better inventory, maybe better strategic partnership and better pricing. So we'll just reconnect to the local provider.
Okay.
And then on the user, like just to answer straight away, the user experience side for localization side, typically, again, like most of the languages are very easy now, especially with ChatGPT to translate. Yeah, we use ChatGPT as a first layer of translation and then just like hire some consultants to proofread it. We are in Middle East where we support right to left already. So the whole platform that we have supports right to left interface. So we like no problem can localize that. And just to answer the user experience side, we always try to change the user experience of our interfaces to fit the needs of our partner. For example, if the partner has this font, this color scheme, the roundness of corners are this much, shadows are that, animations are this, we'll adopt all those customizations so that the mini app and interface experience feels like an extension of the core app. So for us, what's important is for end customer, they don't see where we are stepping in from the native app part. This way we ensure that the user experience is smooth. But also at the same time, with like, let's say 10 mini apps or 10 services, it's relatively easy right now. You just basically put all of these buttons somewhere in like home screen or maybe like on some tab, I'll call it like mall or lifestyle services. And that's how usually they like to present it. But when you reach like certain like over, let's say 20, 30, 50 mini apps, that's where you need to start building this interface, which will dynamically change based on the needs of the user. For example, if they are looking into, let's say, e-commerce into, let's say, furniture, then you put like more furniture mini apps or services in there. Or if they use travel, then you put travel in the top, or like recently used mini app. That's kind of.
And I would imagine that is where we're all going to head, because my interest with a particular super app could be very different than yours, right?
You can think about it as your phone, right? Technically, phone, you can argue phone is a super app on its own, right? Because you have like screen with like bunch of buttons.
Yep.
My screen is totally different from yours because I like it that way. You like it this way. That's what WeChat innovated, where they have like this interesting gesture which nobody adopted, which you like swipe down instead of refreshing it, like opens a new screen, and you essentially can reorganize the mini apps as you want. If you want to use something more often, then it's just there. In terms of the commercials, when we started, we were thinking how to actually position ourselves, and the closest we found was something like affiliate network. essentially. Companies like Shopback and a bunch of these cashback players, they're all using these affiliate networks where in essence they have a bunch of advertisers and a bunch of publishers connecting without negotiating a lot of terms, and this affiliate network will actually kind of find the middle ground between advertisers and publishers. In essence, what we do, there's a commission that each service has, like intrinsically, and we like to take a cut of that. The majority of that goes to the super app so that they can actually generate revenue. We would like to take a small cut of that, and the advertiser obviously getting a way bigger traffic source than, let's say, advertising on Facebook or Google, because they're essentially charging like CPA, cost per acquisition, instead of like charging for just viewership, So it's a win-win-win for everyone.
Okay. And from a technology perspective, just keeping you in the world of technology, how often are you now coming across where you realize that the native app is not built to carry the weight, if I may use the term, of all these mini apps that they want to offer? Because at the end of the day, you're still only as good as the native app, right? You could put, as you said, 100 services behind it, but if your native app keeps hanging or doesn't allow for these journeys to be as seamless, how often is that a problem that you are encountering? Because I would imagine that would be happening all the time, because a lot of these apps were never envisaged to be built in such a complex manner. Are you coming across it, and how do you solve for it?
Yeah, so from technical point of view, we are very, very simple. It's just simple SDK. In essence, it's like piece of code which can sit in any app. It can be super old school app, like 2008 build, for example, and they'll still be able to launch our software. And the mini app experience are essentially loaded from web. So it doesn't really impact the performance of the native app experience. However, I think more importantly, it's, as mentioned, just the take rate, or like how many users actually adopt this service. I think that's typically like varies, and like for us it's really hard to say, because some apps with a lot of users can have a way lower conversion rate than other apps which have fewer users. The good thing about our business and technology is that it's very, very scalable, so we can launch in any app, and we are not picky. We can work with anyone. And you never know. We were surprised so many times by different outcomes where small buy now pay later app would adopt it and it would generate way more transactions than like giant whatever mobile wallet, just because people like loans more than just paying with cash, Yeah, and like that's why we are very, very open-minded, and technology is very scalable, so we can work with anyone. And then we see, honestly, without trying hard to say, we try and see if it works. It works. If it doesn't work, then we move on.
So you mentioned a couple of names, right? You mentioned Revolut, you mentioned Trip.com. So let me put you on the spot, and this is not a plug for anyone globally, but tell us about a couple of examples, a couple of emerging super apps, not the established ones, that you find quite fascinating in terms of what they're actually doing, whether they're your clients or not, irrespective. And maybe they come from parts of the world that we don't hear about, right? Kaspi was an eye-opener for me, right? When I first heard of Kaspi, because I'd heard of Tinkoff a few times, but never had heard of Kaspi, right? And then, having spoken to Mikhail, and prior to that, actually educating myself in Kaspi just blew my mind away, right?
You should, when you come to Kazakhstan, you'll be it's like crazy, actually.
Which I am due to come, so I'm going to make sure that between yourself and Mikhail, I find two hosts to take me around. No, I do. But so give me a few names. Give me a few names of emerging super apps from different parts of the world that you have worked with, and what do you like about them? What are they doing differently?
Yeah, so we have very different partners in different countries, but like few come to mind just because they are recent. First one is a digital bank called Cohorts. It's one of the biggest digital, if not the biggest digital bank in Canada.
Okay. How do you spell it?
Koho.
Coho. Okay.
Yeah. So what I can announce is we launched eSIM integration, where their users now can access and buy travel eSIMs. Moreover, they created a interesting value proposition where their premium customers get free and 5 gigabytes per month, completely free, included in their plan, which is amazing. Like, when was the last time your bank gave you like connectivity when you travel? That never happened.
When was the last time your bank gave you anything?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like, I feel like what's cool about it is that for me personally, like my credit card does have this airport lounge. Last year I didn't use it. Year before I never used it. I didn't use it as well. Like I tried to come to airport like just before
Same
the train.
here.
Exactly, yeah, because you travel a lot, right?
45 minutes.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So like, well, in that case for me, that like whatever airport lounge benefit doesn't really apply, right? However, eSIM or local connectivity, I personally spend a lot of money on local connectivity, and that's like, and for me, what's exciting about that use case is that it's a first app we've launched in developed market like Canada, where like there were a lot of people, I remember when we started saying, sure, Asia might work, but like in Europe and US it's not going to work. And now we see, like Revolut actively going in that direction. Obviously our partner, and the most interesting one, we don't work with them, but I just saw that X hired the guy from Cash App, which is quite obvious why they hired him for, right? So I'm quite curious, like imagine what's going to happen there when they're going to launch like payment acceptance or like peer-to-peer payments, It opens quite a lot of doors. So this is the interesting example there. Now moving on to the Middle East, we have a partner like on a completely different spectrum. It's a company called Roshan. It's the biggest real estate developer in Saudi Arabia. Very, very ambitious projects. The ones that I can announce are we launch home services. So they have an app basically for residents of their communities. And again, this is not like small real estate company. They're building like hundreds of thousands of homes, which is like potential few million.
I know Roshan well, but please tell us more.
So it's like a few million potential customers, and then few million customers that can like aspire to be part of that community. And imagine your real estate developer gives you an app where you can buy, as soon as you bought a house, you can order home cleaning, car washing, and some of these like home related services,
gardening services.
Correct. Yeah, because right now you probably would use like whatever Urban
driver on hire, nannies, cook.
Exactly.
Cooks.
It's like all great ideas, So what we gave is
there's a whole ecosystem you can build around your real estate.
Correct. This is first one. Second one is marketplace. So imagine you can buy furniture. You are like in search of plant. Like instead of going for Lazada or like I don't know what's here, like a Souk or one of those.
There's loads of options.
Noon. You just open the house like app there and just choose the plant or choose the kind of furniture piece, just buy it there. And then later on we are going to launch facilities management, so it's booking of tennis courts and all of those related things, and then a micro mobility and ride hailing. So this is like on a completely different spectrum of super app. It's not going to be like hundreds of millions of users, although you never know how they're going to go about it. But in the meantime, because the community is very engaged,
it can be very sticky.
That's the thing, yeah. So for us, that's the most important thing. Like the app needs to be very sticky. It can be 100,000 users or 10,000 users, but like people have to open it on a weekly basis. This is on the other spectrum. And then in Southeast Asia, we work with company like Gcash, for example. This is probably
which is a wonderful story.
Yeah.
And if I can get their founder on my show, it would be great. I'm pursuing her hard.
Yeah.
So this is a shout out if she hears this.
Yeah. So Gcash was one of the first companies we started working with back in 2020, and so far we launched more than 600 mini app integrations in there.
Wow.
And these are ranging from like electronics and food and furniture and pretty much all major pharmacy chains we've integrated. Imagine you can like order pharmaceuticals and meds directly inside of your mobile wallet. It's like things that you don't really hear about in the rest of the world. So these are like 3 different use cases. Recent one also, like we will start working with a company called World App. It's Sam Altman's crypto app. This is very interesting because they have such a big user base. It's 15 million users, and they're all scattered across the world. And the challenge we have there is, as you rightly mentioned, is localization. What do we offer them that is uniquely appropriate for everyone? And they have users in like Brazil, Argentina, Uganda, Kenya, Japan, Singapore, all over the place. We launched like 11 mini apps in there.
So let me ask a question, right? Because it stems, so 2 questions straight away come to mind. So one is, these are very different cohorts of customers, right? You have a real estate developer, you have Gcash, which is I call it a wallet, financial services player. You mentioned a travel company trip. So how do you go about targeting them? You're a startup at the end of the day. You don't have a team of 1,000 salespeople unless you tell me you do, right? So how do you go about selecting which vertical do you want to target, right? Because starting with that vertical, you get a particular type of customer base. There are adjacencies which are different, which allows you to build the back end, or in your case, your service proposition. How do you serve? And second question is there a super popular SKU, right, which everybody's asking for? And I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, and I'll tell you if I thought about the same answer, but I want to steal the answer away from you. So two parts to that question. How do you target? B, is there a common service that everybody wants?
So this is exactly our thinking process 5 years ago, when we had this idea, okay, someone will become super app. And it was like very open-ended question, Then we were like thinking, who can become super app? And what we did basically is we did a matrix in Excel. It was very simple. On one side, we did all the options of apps. So your financial app, social network, travel app, whatever, etc., etc., etc. And then on the other side, we wrote all the different services that might be integrated. So e-commerce, travel, financial services, gaming, lifestyle, cinema booking, etc. And essentially, we started ticking and seeing what can be launched where. And if cinema booking is launched in travel, we're like, probably not. I wouldn't buy cinema tickets inside of travel app. If let's say there is a financial service in, let's say, social media network, maybe, but also not sure, in essence, what we found,
you were wrong.
Maybe, yeah.
No, because I'd argue that it's very, very hard to say what people will use.
Yeah.
Right?
So exactly. But what it was, there was margin of error, obviously, but there was clear winner, which was financial services can take on everything pretty much.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, we didn't specify it's wallet or bank. For us as a user, it doesn't matter, right? You don't think of Cash App and bank as like two different. It's just financial services app, right? And that's how we started, and it was a very spot on, because when we started in 2020, we started literally targeting like wallets in Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and we ended up working with Gcash, Dana, Touch and Go in these countries, because it was like those guys were thinking about becoming super apps at the time when we started introducing our offering. And moving forward now, essentially we kind of continue same thinking process where we are thinking who else, and in the rest of the world, because there are not many digital wallets here, we think digital banks can be adopting that. I'm open to work with traditional banks as well, and we are in talks with a bunch, but it just happened that digital banks typically move faster,
because they have the infrastructure, the mindset, so on.
Although if we spoke to a bunch of traditional ones that are very, very advanced, and they have completely new teams that are very, very advanced and more like startup friendly, I guess. Kaspi is a good example, which was like just normal traditional bank.
Even Tinkoff started as a credit card company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? They're a credit loan company. So
exactly. So you can transform, I guess. So for us, it doesn't matter. It can be anyone. And sometimes it just happens that we get inquiries from other verticals. Like we have food delivery app in one country in the Middle East that we are going to announce like soon, actually. Real estate company, buy now, pay later in Southeast Asia. So
what is the one service that all of them want?
Two services that right now the most popular are e-commerce and eSIM.
eSIMs, I was gonna say.
Honestly,
what is this?
And I'll give you also interesting story. So Eralo's founder is my good friend, and we envisioned the idea of integrating eSIM 5 years ago.
Right.
And eSIM mini app was the first mini app we've built back in 2019.
Okay.
All right. It took us 5 years to get to a point where people start to understand what it is. And I'm like really appreciate companies like Nubank and Revolut really popularizing this concept, because before we would come to a company and explain exactly the same proposition. We would be like, hey, imagine you give your connectivity to your users when they travel. You can give it for free. They can charge for it. You can charge for it, and users will pay. But in essence, you give this amazing convenience, right? And people didn't really think about it as very, very seriously. And now, like we see more and more companies adopting it, and we're jumping on that and like trying to acquire as many customers as possible there.
So the second one, which is e-commerce, is very interesting, right? So a number of banks have tried to launch marketplaces, right? Most of them have done a miserable job, right? And why is that?
So I'm not sure which ones are you referring to.
I don't want to take names, but there's quite a few. I think there are more bad examples than good examples. Let's be honest. Where in that journey do they miss a trick?
So for I'll just tell literally the way we look into it, and we're kind of numbers driven. We see conversion rate improving straight away when there is loan at checkout. Simple as that.
When there's loans at checkout.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. That's why Klarna, Affirm, and all of these guys are integrating shopping native into their app, because now people use Klarna to get a loan. Yeah. Correct. So
Klarna, I think 2-3 years ago, apparently said that they generated 300 million unique clicks for their
I wouldn't be surprised.
Their merchants. So these are people, I'm assuming, are coming through the Klarna app and then going into the shopping app, right?
Correct. Yeah. And the way we think is the banks, like buy now pay later, offer 4 installments. So 4 months installments. Banks can offer 12 to 24 months loan, which buy now pay later wouldn't be able to offer. And I feel like that's the value proposition that we are looking into. So how can the bank tie the e-commerce experience with an amazing value proposition on the financial side, so that for user, it's not about like, is it inside of the app or what's the integration layer? User experience should be secondary. It just needs to be smooth. But there needs to be this USP where, let's say, on the Klarna, you can get a fridge for 4 months, but on some bank app, you can get it for 12 months or 24 months. And there's no commission, for example, because merchant will pay, right? The MDR or like increased take rate. And maybe on top, you get like 10 to 1 miles, you know? And you know the game of miles in like Singapore, right? It's like credit card offers new better deal. People suddenly flock into that credit card scheme, right? So it's very interesting how I guess consumer behavior can be changed if the USP is like really spot on.
So then it stems the question, which is, beyond banking, as I started saying, right? So I work for a consulting firm. We did about 2 or 3 years ago in the UAE, we did this quite an extensive analysis where we went and spoke to customers of the 12 of the biggest banks in the region, right? Or in the country. And we actually asked them very sort of pointed, straight questions in terms of would they consume beyond banking services from the banks? I think overwhelmingly the answer was yes, they were open to it, but they were clearly, if I haven't forgotten, of an opinion that it's got to be something better, differentiated, and definitely as good as the experience that they have from the current marketplaces, specifically in terms of e-commerce, travel services. eSIMs was not a thing at that time, but but so on and so forth. So, question for you: you work with a number of digital banks, but let me pose a question, and I think this is a call out to all the traditional banks. What do the traditional banks need to do differently to be able to attract customers to transact with them? And I use the word transact in a holistic sense, right? More on the beyond banking services.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the number one thing, again, like just I have limited experience living in UAE and experiencing the banks, but just judging
go globally.
Yeah, but even in Singapore, like inferior digital banks shouldn't have existed. The reason they exist is because traditional banks just didn't innovate, right? And I used to live in UK. I had pretty much I had free bank accounts, like all the big names, and the apps were just bad. You're just not enjoying opening it, and then that's why Revolut, Monzo, and all of these guys suddenly popped up, because the people just hated opening the bank experience. So I feel like that's number one. The app needs to be really, really fast, not laggy, totally very easy to use, and very easy to navigate. This is step one. And secondly, I feel like what's not happening as again, like coming back to our eSIM example, is just taking this bet on different services and just launching them and seeing what might work, because you never know. Like even these established guys in digital bank space, and we know them well, not everything worked there, and not everything worked also on day one. And that's why there is, let's say, if you are launching new service, maybe your USP without, let's say, loyalty is not going to be good enough. But then you launch loyalty, suddenly it makes sense, because now you're getting, let's say, 10 to 1 miles on, let's say, buying a fridge. Like, and you're buying like $10,000 fridge, so you're going to get 10,000 miles. Like, why not buy it inside of the bank, right? So I guess just trying out different things faster. And I was like listening to recently the interview of Nick Storonsky on literally like last week or this week on Slash, and yeah, he was also saying like, oh, we actually don't know, we just like launch and see if it works.
Just test and learn, right? And
and it's hard to say, right? I mean, like if WeChat would be like, I don't know, ideating, doing user research before launching services, it would be impossible for them to scale to right now 2 million mini apps accessible inside of WeChat.
2 million
2 million mini apps are accessible inside of WeChat now.
How do you even manage that from a customer perspective? Because mostly we use 15 apps, right?
So there's a thing. These mini apps doesn't need to be like the one that you open every day. I'll give you an example. Like, I hate websites of airports for checking timetable. They just like, for some reason they're all clunky. That's why I prefer app. But then like downloading Changi app, Dubai airport app, Abu Dhabi airport app is also time consuming. When I was in China, I visited 3 airports there. You arrive to the airport, there's a big QR code, and there's like a small WeChat logo on the side. So you understand, you scan it with WeChat. You scan it with WeChat, it opens app-like experience inside of WeChat. You check your timetable, subscribe for notifications for your flight, like go for the flight, close the mini app and never use it again until you next time you're in the airport. And there are all of these user experiences where you just don't need an app. Like, and I guess this is like the ultimate super app, I guess, experience, where you are using things that you might use once a year. Essentially like an app that you would download before, you just use it, and then you wouldn't come back to that for another year until you use it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, super apps are going to become a thing according to you, which means you're going to start having some serious competitors.
Yeah.
Right. So how does Boxo differentiate itself? How, A, differentiate, and B, how do you not risk becoming commoditized? Because at the end of the day, you're playing a role of an aggregator.
Yeah.
Right. So compete, commoditize. How do you deal with that over a period of time?
Yeah. So on the competition side, I guess we are more like partnering with certain companies than competing. So in essence, the closest competition would be a company that offers certain APIs for these new services. But we are actually partners more than competition. So to give you an example, let's say an app offers, even like eSIM is a good example, right? Like we are not providers of eSIMs. Well, we basically partner with Airalo, we partner with a couple of other players, and they are our backend provider. We've built this mini app experience and launch it now. And essentially what we are doing is we are saving the backend providers time doing the integrations. And for host apps, as we call them, not building this custom integration with each provider. So on the competition side, we want to position ourselves very, very neutral, where we work with everyone on both super app side and service provider side. And essentially like being like an app store where you can choose if you want to, as you mentioned, right? Let's say if you have a preference for certain remittance providers, sure. If not, we have a bunch of providers who work with, new one of them. And if you like the terms, then just launch it. So this is on the competition side. And the second question was
commoditization.
Yeah, in terms of
how do you not get commoditized?
Yeah. So that's where we just need to be very, very fast creating a lot of value for our customers, where so like we want to power not one integration basically, because if we power one integration, we are easily replaceable at some point, especially if imagine you launch a service and suddenly it makes like $20 million a year revenue, you know, like suddenly it makes sense to build in-house. What we want to do is like launch so many services that it becomes just not cost effective for our partner to build all of these things in-house at some point. So for them, it's easier to partner with us. And we take not significant revenue share from each transaction for them to do simple cost-benefit analysis to understand that setting up a squad and managing and building this product and maintaining this product is just going to be not as cost-effective as giving a share for us. So that's where we are positioning ourselves. There is always risk, but so far we haven't seen like significant problems there.
Okay. So my last question to you. Right, you talked about geographic expansion. Obviously, you're doing it. Hence, you're in the Middle East, and I know you got a bunch of meetings, which is well done. You're obviously constantly building partnerships at the back end in terms of either verticals or providers within verticals. Right. What's kind of the strategy for the next 2 to 3 years beyond these two things?
So we want to, like what we found, as you rightly mentioned, there are not many super apps in each country. That's why we don't want to go deep into each country. So if we have one partner in one country, for us it's enough. And that's where we are now kind of looking into essentially all the other countries' expansion where we haven't had a chance to work with someone. So it's Europe. We haven't touched at all. We have 0 kind of partners there and clients. And I'm very, very excited because we did like literally a couple of weeks ago, like a maths. There are 60 digital banks in Europe. Compare that to like maybe 20 in Southeast Asia. They're way more fragmented. Resources are definitely not, like they're not Revolut, and probably they're not going to become a Revolut. But they have maybe big enough user base, sticky enough user base that they might consider offering new services. That's where we want to be. Obviously, North America, we are already in Canada. In US, we are with this crypto app, but there are so many other companies that we can work with there. And also, this is on the geographical expansion, and then on the vertical expansion. So we are right now touching very actively travel. So next few months, we're going to launch airport lounges, integration with Priority Pass, hotel booking experience, and we're going to launch remittance in the next month or two with one partner. So these are just like travel, and then there are all the other verticals that we haven't touched. Financial services is very interesting. We haven't touched at all, like insurance, embedded wealth management. There are like requests for that, like stock trading, crypto trading maybe at some point. So that's probably the next 2 years.
I think with financial services, there is an added challenge, in my humble opinion, with the regulation, right? Because the regulation changes, embedded finance is talked about a lot in a number of geographies. But to be honest with you, we are not really seeing mass adoption or a number of use cases beyond payments and a little bit of BNPL, because I don't think the regulator itself has figured out in terms of who holds the customer records, where is the selling of the financial services product having, is this, is our customers aware that what data they're giving? I think, I encourage you to look at financial services, but I think within financial services, there will be products that are easier to offer. And then there are products which are incredibly complex to offer. And I guess which those are. But I think it would be quite interesting. I'm assuming there is no interest in launching a super app yourself.
No, the reason we decided to do Boxo was because, again, back in 2019, we thought to launch our own super app in the beginning. But then what we realized was, coming back to one of the first answers I gave to you, that to become a really successful super app, you need to have certain use case that's very, very sticky already. So without that, just being super app doesn't work. So you cannot like launch something and just call it super app. You need to have either ride hailing or wallet or bank or food delivery app or something that's like really high engaging, and then you start expanding verticals.
I have a view on that. It's not supposed to just be engaging, but your backbone product has to make money.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And hence I have personally always had a concern with the ride hailing apps becoming successful super apps, because I think the economics of ride hailing, right, make it, make it very hard to make money. And if your core backbone never makes money, it constantly distracts you from being able to invest. Now, I might be proven wrong over a period of time, but I'm still cautious about whether any of these ride-hailing apps will actually become hugely profitable super apps. It's one thing for Grab to have now spun off GSX, where they might make a lot of money as a digital bank, but will the core of Grab ever, I think they're 11 years now already into the business, not yet having made money, or I don't know if you have now, but 11 years is a long time. So I think that backbone product is not just engaging. I think it also has to be profitable in my humble opinion.
And also brand perception.
Exactly.
Because like another example in Kazakhstan, because like Kaspi is obviously the super app, but another example is actually local taxi, which is Russian taxi provider Yandex, which is like before it was they had this app called Yandex Taxi. Now it's called, they completely renamed it. Now it's called Yandex Go. The reason they rebranded it is because now they have like 10, I think. You can like buy event tickets there. You can buy groceries, the scooters, mini scooters, so many things in there. And there was like a pretty big outdoor media push on their side to change the perception of the app from being just taxi app into becoming like this everything app where you do not only taxi service. So I guess like that's one of the challenges some of these apps in the rest of the world face.
Brand perception.
Yeah, brand perception, where you're like, well, I use Grab as a taxi, and
do I want to do everything else on it?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe in some countries, people think of it as more than just taxi app. And Kaspi was very, very like, I don't know how I can't remember, because it just happened so suddenly that like suddenly you're like ordering groceries in your bank app. Like I literally order groceries in there, and the brand. And also another thing I wanted to point out is interesting point for consumers. Like I was actually just checking with my team as well in China. Nobody calls WeChat and Alipay super app as a consumer. No. So super app is a totally technical and
I'm sure it's some consultant who came.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a concept which is like among fintech people kind of, you talk about it as a super app, but as a consumer, you wouldn't like say, hey, I'm using Kaspi super app. You just call it Kaspi, or you just call it WeChat, or you just call it Alipay. And there's this like brand perception that you can open this app and like do all these random things in there just because you're used to it.
So not to. This is an event. This is a show where I ask the questions, not give the answers. But I've always viewed that you either build a connected ecosystem around your core service, right? So if it's ride hailing, you build everything around travel and what touches the world of travel, and then you'll find from there adjacencies that you can get into. Or the other way is that if you actually have arguably a very homogeneous customer base, right? And then you look at that customer base and you build everything around that customer base, which is a connected ecosystem, and then you find adjacencies. I think to me, those are the two very risk-averse ways to go about doing it, rather than saying, we'll just offer everything and then we'll see where it captures. The fact is that latter is very hard, because most of these sort of apps have a very heterogeneous customer base. Not all of them, but they do, right? And so you have everybody from, I guess, a 60-year-old father of 3 and a 15-year-old, break dancer who goes to high school. So, it's harder to build. So I think it's easier to build your ecosystem around what the core service is. Kani, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Arjun.
I wish you the very best. I also give a shout out to, I guess, all the players in this region in the Middle East or MENA who are considering super apps or multifunctional apps, that they should give you a call and have a conversation at the very least. Have a good trip
Thanks so much,
to
Arjun.
this part of the world. And I'm sure our paths will cross again. If nothing else, we'll meet again in Singapore FinTech Festival next year, right? So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate giving me opportunity to talk about what we do in super apps, and thanks so much for inviting me here.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
So ladies and gentlemen, that was Kaniyet Rayev, who is the CEO of Boxo. And as he said, they help every app become a super app, only if you want to become a super app. He's in the Middle East. I'm sure a number of you are going to be meeting him, but for those who want to look him up, the company is called Boxo. That's Boxo. So with that, I'll say goodbye and see you next week. Bye-bye.